Okay, welcome back to the 1 in 3 Speakout hosted by Advocates for Youth. I'm Graciela, and I am privileged to be one of the hosts on this historic event. We're beginning the fourth hour of the first ever online abortion Speakout. Throughout the day, we'll head from over 100 people. We'll hear from over 100 people talking about their experiences with abortion care. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for the many people who are joining us with their personal stories. As many of you know, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime here in the United States. Despite the fact that abortion is very common, we rarely talk about our decisions to end a pregnancy. For too long, conversations around abortion have been dominated by politicians and anti-choice activists who use shame and stigma as a tool to silence people and to advance legislation that limits access to abortion services. Today, we are working to build a new conversation, one that is grounded in the lived experiences of real people, one that works toward building community rather than isolation, compassion rather than shame. We are shattering the silence. We honor the long tradition of speakouts that started on the eve of the historic Roe v. Wade decision. We also honor the long tradition of storytelling in social justice movements, the tradition of placing people at their lived experiences at the center of the conversation. Today, Advocates for Youth is grateful for the opportunity to host and bring together people from all around the country to break through the stigma and shame people are made to feel around abortion and to highlight real people's experiences and stories around abortion care. In the last hour of the Speak Out, we heard from Charity, who was pressured by family and friends to stay silent about her abortion, from Representative Barbara Lee, a champion of access to safe abortion care, and we heard from many others. All of us have a role in shattering the stigma and ensuring that women have access to safe, affordable, and legal abortion care. So today, if you have a personal story and would like to share it, just visit www.1in3campaign.org to share your written story or video story. I'm joined in this hour by Jessica, Jessica Pierce, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm happy to be here. Yeah. So we would like to encourage everyone who's watching, again, one more time, I'll say it just so no one forgets, to go onto the website, log on, and sign the pledge so that we can end the stigma around shame around abortion. So again, www.1in3campaign.org. So,
Jess, will you introduce our next guest? Okay. So next we're going to have a video, a story shared by video. So.
During my 3rd week of college, crouched in a stall in my new dorm's communal bathroom, I found out I was pregnant. I had been crying every day, though I was so happy to finally be out of my hometown. When I vomited into my orange juice in the dining hall, I knew something was wrong. I didn't want to be pregnant. I needed to have an abortion because I don't have a thyroid, and I've been told if I want to have a child, my pregnancy needs to be carefully planned and managed. I needed to have an abortion because my man had another girl pregnant in a faraway state. And when I called and asked what he would do if I was pregnant, he said he would commit suicide. I needed to have an abortion because my RA told me I'd be kicked out of the dorms if I continued my pregnancy, and I was on full financial aid and couldn't afford to live off campus. But I don't think any of that matters. What matters is that I didn't want to be pregnant. I do not need to justify that to anyone. Anonymous.
Wow, that was so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your story and helping us shatter the stigma. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's really, I've just been listening to the stories and watching the stories all day, and it's, I had a moment as I was coming here to really think about, do I want to share my story? Am I comfortable sharing my story? And I think, I'll take the moment that I have a little bit of host liberty to share my story. I was living in New York. I'm from California originally, so I probably went to the farthest possible end of where I could be away from home. And, I was on birth control. I was on the pill. We also had used a condom. The condom broke. And I also used the morning after pill. So I often tell people when I do tell my story that all those percentages are real, and I'm that one. I'm always that percentage, and I was lucky enough to have insurance at the time, so I tried to find a provider, and I just remember, I could hear it in the tone of people I was talking to of like, oh my God, she's calling to see if we provide an abortion. It's just like almost they were shocked that I would even ask if that was something that they did. And I found a place, and I think what was the most jarring part of the experience, honestly, for me, was just that I was sitting in a room of women that looked like me. I felt the need to almost want to have a conversation with people in the room. I didn't have a conversation with people in the room. I went through the experience alone, for me, afterwards, it was pretty painful. I, had serious cramping, going through it alone, that was my process and my choice that I made at the time. And kind of looking back now, I know how important it is for me to at least share the story and tell people, that it's okay. It happens, and the people that have abortions look like every single type of person. And I think a lot of times people have a preconceived notion of what someone who would choose to have an abortion looks like, or what type of person or what type of lane that they would choose to be in. And I think the reality of the situation is they look like all of us. Mm-hmm. And it's a choice that I decided to make. And, everyone should be able to make their own health choices. And, I'm happy with the choice that I made looking back. And, I think that's what this campaign is really about, is sharing our stories so that more people can feel comfortable at least making whatever their decision is, whatever their choice is. No decision is more right than any other decision. And I think the more that we can talk about it, the more that we can at least get comfortable, discussing it out loud and in front of people.
Thank you so much. That's so important, especially your last points, and we're honored that you shared our story with us today. We're now joined by Julie on Skype. Julie, tell us your story.
Hi. I have actually had 2 abortions, and despite a somewhat risky sexual history when I was younger, they weren't until I was 27. The first one was in August 2012, and I had been with my partner at the time for about 9 months. And I had a lot of problems with hormonal birth control, and so I wasn't on any birth control, and we had been using both condoms and the pull-out method. And I ended up getting pregnant, and I knew that I was going to have an abortion, and that was a rational, logical decision, but it was still a very emotionally difficult process for me because I had sort of an emotional dissonance about it. I felt like I was very much in love with my partner, and we were kind of in our honeymoon period, and I felt pressure to take a step that would show sort of how strong our love was and how much we cared about each other. And I felt as if having a child was sort of a way to do that. And it was a strange place to be in for me, because I knew that I didn't want a child and that I actually maybe never wanted to have a child. But at the same time, I felt this sort of strange expectation, and I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't feel like it was really me. It was something that I felt like I had sort of been told or taught, and so that was difficult. But I knew that I was going to have an abortion. I did, and I didn't regret it, but it was hard for me. My partner was very supportive, and he didn't do what I was a little bit afraid he would do, which was sort of eject himself from the situation and say, this is completely up to you, do whatever you want. He said,
I would like for you to have an abortion because I don't think that we're ready to have a child, but I respect your right to decide what you ultimately want to do. So I appreciated a lot that he was active in making that decision with me. The actual process was okay, but I remember being in the waiting room, not in the waiting room initially, but at Planned Parenthood after you sort of go through the first waiting room, once you change into your hospital gown and everything, and you're waiting to go in for the actual procedure, there are a bunch of young women, or young women in my case, in a room together getting ready to go in. And we were all very isolated despite being in a room together about to go through something super intense. And I just remember looking around and seeing one girl texting and one girl just kind of quietly crying by herself in a corner, and another girl reading, and everyone just looking like they were going through their own experience by themselves and feeling bad that we were not talking to each other and not acknowledging the fact that we were all going through something really difficult and big. And we were in there waiting for a really long time, and no one had gone out for a while. And someone who worked at Planned Parenthood came in, and I said, hey, is there going to be, an update soon or anything? Because we've all been in here for a while. And then everybody was like, yeah, what's going on? And it felt like we all kind of broke the silence a little bit. And then we started talking to each other somewhat after that. And it felt like a mirror of the way I had felt about my experience and being able to talk to people about it in my regular life, because I had only told 2 or 3 people, and it was really difficult for me, and I was very ashamed. And I ended up getting a second abortion this year, at the beginning of this year, about a year and a half later, because I had an IUD put in after that first abortion, and I had a lot of problems with it, and I had to have it taken out because I was having random bleeding and pain almost every time I had sex, and a lot of cramps all the time. And so I had it taken out, and I was very paranoid about getting pregnant again, because it was not fun having to decide to have an abortion and to go through that. So we always used condoms, and I honestly don't know how I got pregnant again. I must be extremely fertile. But I did, and I was really, really embarrassed. Like, I didn't want to tell anyone that not only am I having an abortion, but I'm having a second abortion. And within, within a year and a half period. And it was strange to me that I had so many close female friends, but none of them had ever disclosed to me that they had had an abortion before. And I was afraid to tell any of them, aside from, like my best friend that I had told about the previous one. And I did end up telling one friend, and she immediately, when I told her, she was like, because I had just had the abortion, I said, oh, I'm sorry that I couldn't, see you or whatever the other day. I was having an abortion. And I just said it because I don't know why. And she said, oh, wow, I had one too, in college. And then we kind of talked about it, and it felt normal and more acceptable, and it felt really good and really empowering, and like a huge weight had sort of been lifted off my shoulder. Like, the actual act of having an abortion was something that I always knew I was going to do when it was a decision I was able to make. It was difficult, but what was really difficult was all of the shame and the guilt that was associated with it for such a long time for me, and just the pure act of talking to someone else about it and sharing it and having them share it and making it feel like it was less horrible of a thing and not something to be ashamed of was really really powerful for me. And that's why I wanted to do this.
Julie, thank you so much for sharing your story from one fertile sister to another. Really appreciate that.
I think it's really important to share the stories that are like, yeah, this is my second abortion, and it's not something that should be embarrassing. Like she said that she felt embarrassed. Like, I'm really glad that that she was able to find her friend who had also had one and just talk about it in a normal conversation, because it's a normal medical procedure, and it's one that 1 in 3 women have, which is like tons and tons of women. And I don't think that the other day we were having, as I had mentioned earlier, an abortion dialogue, and I mentioned that abortions are an abortion procedure is more safe than a colonoscopy, and people were like shocked by that. They were floored, but I was like, yeah, it's just this normal thing that a lot of women have done because it's a medical need and it's a medical procedure. So.
Right, and just like we discuss anything else, we should be able to discuss having an abortion.
Exactly.
And I think that's the thing that I think the more that we're talking about it, I'm happy Julie came on and even talked about having the second abortion, because I think a lot of times people say, okay, it's a mistake, you know, I had an abortion once and then that's it. And, you know, if you have an abortion once or you have an abortion twice, there's no difference in it. And everyone should feel comfortable making whatever medical decision they have to make, going through whatever they have to go through. And, you know, I think the more we get people to talk about it and say, I've had it more than once, I think the more we'll actually see people feeling comfortable even making the decision in the first place.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Our next Skype guest is Diane. Diane will be sharing her story in Spanish today. Bienvenida, Diane. Puedes empezar cuando quieras.
Bueno, primero que todo, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Diana Alarcón. Soy colombiana. Mi experiencia de aborto fue a los 16 años. Fue muy difícil. Vengo de una familia muy católica, muy conservadora, con valores morales, digamos, entre comillas, muy difíciles de entender con respecto a la sexualidad y a tener relaciones antes del matrimonio. Así que no estaba segura si estaba embarazada o no, porque tengo endometriosis y mi cuerpo esconde muy fácilmente el embarazo. Perdónenme, estoy un poco nerviosa. Una de mis amigas se había realizado un aborto en el pasado, así que fue ella la que me llevó a esta casa, porque ni siquiera es una clínica, es una casa. No hay ningún letrero ni ningún nombre que diga que es una clínica. Nos recibió un hombre, nos hizo pasar, a ella ya la conocía, así que fue un poco más rápido el proceso. Me dijo que me iba a revisar, que si sabía cuánto tiempo tenía. Le dije que ni siquiera sabía si estaba embarazada. Me revisó con un ecógrafo, o me hicieron una ecografía. Después de eso me dijo que sí, que estaba entrando a los 3 meses y que quería hacer. Dentro del susto, el shock, la conmoción de la decisión, le dije que sí, que quería hacerme algo, y el hombre me dijo, ok, son 500.000 pesos, como unos $250 de aquí. No los tenía creo que como unos $100. Mi amiga me dijo que no me preocupara, que ella llamaba a su novio para que nos completara el dinero. Efectivamente fue su novio el que digamos, puso la otra parte. El tipo me dijo que me sentara en una sala. Después le dijo a mi amiga que se podía retirar. Me entraron a un cuarto sola. Me pusieron una inyección. Me dejaron en esa sala por un buen tiempo. Luego empecé a sentir muchísimo dolor, algo que no había sentido nunca antes. Yo quería que el dolor parara, pero no, aumentaba el nivel como de contracciones, que después, con los años, ya soy mamá, aprendí que era algo así. Tuve muchísimo dolor por mucho rato. Después vino el hombre, me dijo, me bajó los pantalones y me dijo, bueno, ya estás lista. Y después de eso, creo que con tanto dolor, me desmayé o algo así, y no paró el dolor. Igualmente, entre inconsciente y consciente, sentía que me estaba como desgarrando. Um, eh, Después de más o menos una media hora, um, me trajeron como una toalla higiénica o algo como un pañal y me dijo que ya me podía ir. Estaba muy atontada, muy mareada, no hubo un lugar de espera. Sangré muchísimo durante varios días. Estaba muy asustada. La única persona que sabía era mi amiga, así que no hubo nadie que más que ella que me diera soporte. Estaba muy, muy asustada de haberme, de morirme, de que me diera alguna enfermedad. Era un lugar absolutamente sucio, sin sin ninguna higiene. Los aparatos no parecían limpios. El hombre estaba con una bata, aún la recuerdo, una bata como si fuera un carnicero, sangre salpicada. Fue una experiencia muy, muy dolorosa, muy traumática para mí por muchísimo tiempo y dejó en mí una huella de vacío y de inseguridad y de miedo para ir al hospital o al doctor, aún todavía cuando tengo que ir al médico, al doctor, siempre tiene que haber alguien todo el tiempo conmigo. Y si voy a ir y me tienen que hospitalizar, siempre estoy muy tensa y esperando que alguien duerma todo el tiempo conmigo al lado. Me da muchísimo pavor. Eh, sí, sí, dime.
Muchísimas gracias por compartir su historia y ayudar a romper el silencio acerca del aborto. Diane, ¿por qué decidió compartir su historia?
Bueno, hace mucho tiempo me volví activista y parte del trabajo que hago es concientizar a las mujeres sobre la importancia de la educación sexual y reproductiva, pero sobre sus propias decisiones, las decisiones sobre su cuerpo, las decisiones sobre su vida, a no sentir vergüenza o estigma por la decisión tomada. Creo que solamente yo o la persona que lo esté pasando, por la razón que sea, sabe cuál es su razón para practicarse un aborto y creo que nadie debería, ni por religión, ni por Estado, tomar la decisión por encima de nosotros. Así que cuento mi historia porque creo que es la forma mejor para que otras mujeres se empoderen y tomen control sobre sus cuerpos.
Muchísimas gracias, Diane, por darnos el honor de escuchar su historia. Now I'd like to take a moment to encourage everyone who's watching to sign the 1 in 3 pledge to end abortion stigma. Throughout the day, we're asking all viewers to help us build a culture of empathy and support for access to abortion care and to take action by signing the 1 in 3 pledge. You can sign right now online at www.1in3campaign.org. The pledge says, I pledge to speak out against the shame of people who have had an abortion. I will help build a culture of empathy, justice, and support for access to abortion care and for the 1 in 3 women who will have an abortion in her lifetime. The silence and stigma end here. Sign the pledge and share on social media now. Thousands of people have taken the pledge, including student activists around the nation.
My name is Marcus. Even though I was born in New Jersey, I grew up in Lee City, Texas, an idyllic small town where the major concern is who would win the next football game. But still, even we suffer from the effects of abstinence-only education. And we saw this in increased teen pregnancy rates in our communities. People who are getting straight A's as model students, and yet being shamed for their lack of information that they did not provide to them. And we're seeing, as we go forward, that the stigma is a major barrier to anyone who wants to have health care or abortion access in our communities. People are afraid of being kicked out of homes, especially in really religious homes and households. People have talked about those concerns. And my thing is, I think we should have the challenge, we should issue the challenge, first of all, to eliminate stigma. We do this through education. And healthcare access and abortion is important because not only is it conducive to good life, It's important that we have the choice and self-determination of how we live our lives, and that's something that should not be sacrificed or ever given up. I issue a challenge to, one, eliminate stigma in our communities and make sure that we do so through education, and that lastly, you tell your own story, because everyone has a voice when it comes to access.
Yo me comprometo a alzar mi voz en contra de las personas que culpan a mujeres que han tenido un aborto. Yo me comprometo a ser parte de la formación de una cultura con empatía, justicia y que brinde acceso a abortos seguros y que brinda apoyo a 1 de cada 3 personas que tendrán un aborto en su vida. El estigma y el silencio se acaban aquí.
Hi, my name is Layla, and I go to the University of Houston. I grew up in a small town south of Houston called Dickinson, Texas. It's a very religious town. There's a church on almost every corner. We had no sex education, very little at all. I didn't grow up learning about sex or healthy relationships. My parents never taught me anything. But when I was in high school, I was in a short but somewhat emotionally abusive relationship. And I remember sitting down with my mom, and she told me that we don't get abortions in this family. If you get pregnant, you're gonna have a shotgun wedding and that's that. And I was blown away. I was like, what? Where is this coming from? I was shocked, and I've learned over the years that that's basically what a lot of young people go through at home, at school, just the stigma that surrounds the education and learning about your body, learning about sex, learning about relationships. It's absurd. You can't make healthy decisions about your body or your life without an education. Luckily, right next to our campus, the University of Houston, there's a Planned Parenthood, and it does provide abortions. College students there have more access than most people in our state do. But unfortunately, from where I grew up, there are no abortion clinics there. In fact, on your 30-mile drive to Houston, you'll come across a lot of CPCs, which are crisis pregnancy centers. Clinics that are, well, they aren't health clinics, to be honest. They just provide false information and lies and more shame and stigma toward women who are pregnant who go there asking for help. Because their signs read, pregnant, need help. It's a place that you go looking for answers, and there aren't any there. I think that the best way to eradicate stigma and shame is to educate. I think all people have a right to education, a right to make their own healthcare decisions, and they can't do that unless they know about the resources made available to them.
So right now, I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Alethea Smith-Withers. Dr. Smith-Withers is the founder and pastor of the Pavilion of God, a Baptist church, a church in the U Street corridor of the nation's capital. She is the first woman to found an American Baptist church in Washington, D.C. Congratulations on that. She's currently serving as the chair of the board of directors of Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, RCRC. So glad you could be here.
It's wonderful to be here today.
So can you tell us about your congregation and how is abortion an issue that affects them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my congregation is made up of African Americans, Caribbean Americans, and European Americans. So it's a fairly diverse congregation. They are mostly Generation X, Y, and millennials. And so the issue of abortion is certainly a part of their lives, a concern of their lives. We have a wonderful way of looking at a number of issues. It's a community that is committed to dealing with issues of justice. And they talk about, and we all talk about, fighting the Goliaths in the world. And among the Goliaths, we consider things like poverty, homelessness, employment concerns, all of the issues that press in against an individual in ways that would diminish their life and their worth.
Mm-hmm. And how does the issue affect you personally?
Well, personally, I have sat with so many women over the years as individual counselor and talking with them about their personal concerns, because these issues with respect to abortion are personal concerns. And when you sit with someone and you listen to their stories, we have all kinds of assumptions about women and assumptions about abortion. And so it has opened my heart in a way that is one that impacts the messages I offer in sermons. It impacts the kind of support that I offer women when they are facing some of the greatest crises in their lives. We talk a lot about how we are to love God with all our heart and all of our soul and all of our mind, and that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. For many women, we forget the part of loving our neighbor as ourselves. The requisite is to love ourselves. Men get it frequently, but women often don't understand that self-love is the requisite for loving others. And so that impacts me. It saddens me that we're in a place that we use our faith to somehow denigrate our worth and not to elevate women as major contributors to our society. God has called us not only to love others, but to love ourselves in order to know how to love all our neighbors, our family members, of all of those in society. So as a pastor, my job is to be in a place of deep compassion, and not only to simply teach, but to learn. And we learn from women. Religion isn't a static expression in our lives. It is something that is very open to interpretation from each generation.
And can you say just a little bit more about the intersection of faith and abortion? Because I feel like we live our lives at intersections, and I think that that's one you're particularly apt to tell us a little bit more about.
Absolutely. For a person of faith, faith touches every aspect of our lives. It touches how we care for our bodies, how we connect with our relationships, and certainly how we treat ourselves. And a person of faith has to come to a place of understanding the connection between faith and every aspect. For a Christian, we are very focused on doing what God wants us to do and what God has called us to do. And we have to come to understand that it includes every aspect of our life. And so we tend to separate Christianity or our faith from the real concerns of our life. And as a Christian and people of faith that understand that faith is we determines everything and how we embrace every concern in our lives. So the intersectionality is with respect to our employment, our housing, all of the concerns of our life. And so as a Christian minister and working with other clergy throughout this country, we don't want and refuse to have it be suggested that we don't bring our faith into our doctor's office, we don't bring our faith into determining our employment concerns. We have a song that we sing in our denomination, Just Tell Jesus All About It, and that we expect that Jesus hears us in every circumstance of our lives. So therefore, we hear one another in every aspect of our lives.
And why did you want to be a part of this Speak Out?
I think probably the most important thing for a Christian minister and many clergy is boldness. And we don't talk about those issues in gentle ways. We are determined to be bold in our speech, bold in our actions. We know there's a divine imperative to remind and encourage people to know that the ministers and people of faith throughout this country are often able to sit with you and talk with you and offer deep compassion and help you move through any concerns of shame. As a Christian minister, I know that Jesus walked with people, women and men, in all circumstances of our lives. So I'm called forth to be actively present in the life of the real lives of all of us. We don't want to step away from the tough issues. In fact, those are the tough issues that we are called. There's an imperative for us to be present in those times when we step back into the shadows. And so I stand with Christian clergy, with Jewish, Muslim, and other many people, leaders in faith, who are ready and able to stand with women in those challenging moments of determining whether they're moving forward with a pregnancy. And we are asking for and demanding not only access to health care with respect to abortion, but compassionate care for women seeking abortion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us here, for speaking out. And I might have a new place to be on Sunday mornings now.
Yes, we want to talk the truth and invite everyone to know that God and certainly clergy and the majority of people of faith in this country are pro-choice. They understand reproductive justice. in the context of all of the elements of our lives. Justice includes being able to honor yourself and honor your needs.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Now we have a statement from Congressman Mike Quigley from Illinois. As a father of two daughters, the issue of reproductive rights is very personal for me. While the U.S. Constitution guarantees my daughters and women across this country the right to choose for themselves when and how to start their families, more than 40 years after Roe v. Wade, women's reproductive rights are in jeopardy now more than ever. Having a constitutional right and having access to that right are two very different things. For too long, we've allowed abortion opponents to control the debate, ignoring the voices of women around the country and enacting laws limiting a woman's right to choose. We need to begin a new conversation about abortion, one that moves beyond the political rhetoric, and one that focuses on the real experiences of women and families across this country. The 1 in 3 campaign reminds us that abortions has throughout history been an essential part of women's health care. 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime. We have a responsibility to ensure that women, regardless of income or zip code, have access to safe, legal, and affordable abortions. By joining together to end the silence and engage in a personal conversation about abortion in our society, we can encourage supporters of abortion access to publicly take a stand and secure the rights women are entitled to across America. Thank you, Congressman Quigley, for standing with the people sharing their stories today, for helping to engage in a new conversation about abortion in our society, and for fighting for safe, legal, and affordable abortion access. We're joined now on Skype by Jessica, who will share her story. Jessica, start whenever you're ready.
Hello. I found myself pregnant a couple days after my 21st birthday. Not the best birthday present, but that's how life goes. I knew right from the start when I found out I was pregnant that I would have an abortion. I've always been pro-choice. It wasn't like it was a big a deal for me. So I went looking for a clinic to get it done. I wasn't sure where to get one done. From the South, you know, that's a very hush-hush topic. I mean, it is anywhere, but especially in the South. And so I went looking for it online, and most of the websites that I was running into were websites done by crisis pregnancy centers. Luckily, I was able to know that they weren't real abortion clinics, and I was able to actually find one that actually does provide abortions. And I went to the clinic, and I found out that I was very early on in the pregnancy, and I had a medical abortion. And at first, I was relieved. I was just relieved that I wasn't pregnant anymore. A lot of stress was lifted off my shoulders. But of course, with the stigma, I started feeling bad about the choice I made. I felt bad not because of the abortion itself, but because I didn't feel bad. All I felt was relief. And I struggled for the longest time trying to put my feelings to what society's telling I feel and how I actually feel. So I felt horrible for a while. So eventually it led me to looking up stuff of why I felt this way. And I started looking up websites, and luckily, well, I wouldn't say luckily, but the whole the war on women started around this time. There's a lot more people, a lot more laws and everything coming up, and I guess a lot more people were starting to talk about this topic. And it led me to, when I was looking this up, I started realizing that I started going to like feminist websites, and a lot of them were talking about, you know, a lot of women don't feel shame when they have an abortion. And I realized that I'm not alone in this. Like, this whole time I've been thinking like I was crazy for feeling this way. And I realized that I'm not alone. And I started getting involved into feminism. And I started looking it up to women such as Jessica Valenti, who was on here earlier, and Gloria Steinem. And I realized that this is a topic that needs to be discussed. And at the time of my abortion, I wasn't in school, I wasn't working, I wasn't doing anything with my life, and I was depressed. I had anxiety. I knew, you know, at the time I knew I couldn't have a baby. So I was in a horrible place in my life. And then when I started realizing I shouldn't feel bad about myself for having an abortion, I realized this is what I need to do with my life. I realized there's not enough people talking about this topic, and I decided that this is what I'm dedicating my life to. I want to make sure women know that they do have a choice besides parenting and adoption, that there is a third choice. And I decided that I became a women's studies major. And I absolutely love what I do in school. I'm actually a second semester junior. I'll be a senior next semester. And when I first became a women's studies major, I was very quiet about my abortion. So when I first enrolled into my first gender and women's studies classes, I knew from the get-go I would talk about it, but I just didn't know when. So finally the time came to the reproductive rights, and I opened up about it. And this is the first time I was telling anyone about it. And it kind of surprised me, but it didn't at the same time because the nature of the classroom. But I opened up about it, and everyone was so supportive of me. When I went into my car to drive back home, I started crying because I finally felt like I didn't have to be ashamed of this topic anymore. And I knew that this is what I need to do with my life. So as I said, I'm a gender and women's studies major, and I plan on to go to grad school and eventually get a doctorate, and so I can teach women's studies classes. And I tend to focus my studies on reproductive rights and making sure that the choice that women have always stays there and will always remain there.
Jessica, thank you for sharing your story. We're joined on set by Amy Hagstrom Miller, founder, president, and CEO of the Whole Women's Health Clinics.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about your work, Amy?
Absolutely, I can. So I founded Whole Women's Health in 2003 in the state of Texas. I've worked in abortion care for a long time, 25 years or so, but really founded my company on the principle that I think women experience abortion with their whole selves, it's not just a medical procedure, and really wanted an environment that had a holistic approach and that provided kind of a safe oasis environment for women to explore some of the cultural stigmas and shame that sometimes surround sexuality in our culture, and then also be able to obtain excellent medical services and advocacy and support. And so we've been in Texas now since 2003, and then now we also have clinic facilities in Maryland, Minnesota, and most recently in New Mexico.
Wow. So kind of how is the experience different in one of your clinics in comparison to, what some people might experience or know or kind of assume of other clinics?
So we have a really great group of women and men who work in the clinic as patient advocates and are physicians and nurses. We welcome women to bring their family with them. So all of the people that we serve, they can have, their loved ones, their partner, their mom, their best friend, or whoever, be part of the ultrasound, part of the counseling, part of the procedure, part of the recovery if they choose to. And the woman is really at the center of everything we do, and so she gets to call the shots and she gets to kind of determine how that day is going to be for her within the parameters we're allowed to give her that agency, right? I mean, there's certain medical things that we have to do, but even from little things like where she gets to decide what kind of abortion she wants, whether she wants medication abortion or surgery, she gets to decide about pain management, but she also gets to talk about contraception if she wants to see the pregnancy both in the ultrasound or she wants to see the fetal tissue. She's welcome to do that. Sometimes we create an environment where women, may want to, talk to God or pray or whatever they kind of need to do as part of their procedure. That's what we're there for, and we're kind of the guide and the support person for her to really determine how her abortion is going to be for her.
I really like that you mentioned that, because I think I know I've said it before and I don't necessarily mean this, but we tend to say, abortion is just a medical procedure. It's just this normal thing. But that's not to throw under the bus that we need to care for the whole person and the whole being of this woman. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you go beyond the fact that it's a medical procedure, but all of these other things and these other factors in a woman's life.
Well, I think all the women that we serve come from the culture that we all live in. And so they come with some of the stigmas and the shames and sort of the issues around unplanned pregnancy and around sexuality that comes with them into the clinic, and it goes with them afterward. And so it's my commitment to have an environment where she can have that sense of empowerment, but also experience whatever she needs to experience. I mean, I think while we have a fabulous care delivery system, in the same sentence, nobody really wants to be our patient, right? Nobody gets pregnant to have an abortion. And so I think women experience it not just as a medical procedure and not just as a right. I mean, women don't say, I'd like to exercise my civil right to have an abortion, And so I think women come in with that sense of lots of identity examination. Who do I want to be in the world? What are my values? What do I care the most about? So for me, that's the powerful part of abortion, is being able to sit with a woman and witness her acting as the chooser in her life, and acting as, having the control to decide where she wants to go with her life and what values she wants to accept from her upbringing and what ones she may be challenging at that moment in time. So it's oftentimes a real rite of passage for a lot of people facing an unplanned pregnancy in general. No matter what the outcome is, it's a time when women and their families and their loved ones really sort of examine a lot of really deep things, and that's my favorite part about it. I've learned a lot about medicine, learned a lot about regulation, law, a lot of things as a byproduct, but to me, that sort of human rights issue and that deep exploration of, who do I want to be and what cultural values are important to me is the. Plus it involves life, death, sex, really all the good stuff, right? That we get to do in our clinic service delivery.
And so why are you a part of this Speak Out?
Oh, I think the stigma and shame that surrounds abortion in our culture is first of all, it's my life's work to eradicate that. And I think it's one of the main reasons laws like the laws that you've seen pass in Texas pass. So many women that I've served over 25 years in the field think they're the only woman that they know who's ever had an abortion. They think they're the only Christian who's had an abortion. They're the only good mother who's had an abortion. And I think sharing our stories and talking with each other and having that connectivity is where true power lies, and also where the transformation is going to lie to lead us towards a path of eradicating that stigma.
Amy, thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you for the work that you do in the places you do them.
You're welcome, and thanks to you guys for the same thing. Thank you for this work. It's this fabulous effort.
Thank you.
So we're joined now by Emily Litz, who made international headlines when she filmed her abortion. Emily is joining us by Skype. So thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us about your experience, Emily?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I worked at an abortion clinic in New Jersey called Cherry Hill Women's Center, and I worked there for about 2 years. I was a counselor there, or a patient advocate, and I loved the work. I loved every single day. I heard so many different stories from so many different women, and then about a year and a half into my time working there, I found myself pregnant, and I didn't want to be. So I decided to have an abortion. Now, my experience was, I think, a little bit different than most women in America, because it was honestly a very privileged experience, because I knew the doctor, I knew all the people who were going to be in my abortion, In fact, I chose which doctor I wanted, and I chose actually which type of abortion I wanted. I chose to do the manual vacuum aspirator instead of the machine, and I chose who was going to be in my abortion room. And it was a very empowering experience from start to finish. For me, the decision was very easy. I knew the moment that I saw the 2 pink lines what my decision was. And so the entire process, I told all of my friends. I mean, before I had the abortion, I told all of my friends. I told all of my family members. It was just really important to me to be very transparent about the entire thing. And everyone just scooped me up with so much love. Everyone was so supportive and gave me so much empathy. And that's when I kind of realized I needed to use the experience to help people, to help more women, because as a counselor, you kind of repeat the same thing over and over because there's so much information, and women walk in to the clinic with so much unnecessary fear. For instance, women will walk in and believe the procedure will takes 3 hours, and that they'll never be able to have children again, and that they're the only ones who've ever gone through anything like that. And that the biggest thing I wanted to compete was this idea that you have to feel guilty for not feeling guilty. So I decided to film my abortion with the approval of the administration. We filmed my local procedure. I was about 6 weeks along, and I cut it together with interviews of myself throughout the weeks, just to kind of get the idea of what it felt like a week before, the night before. I spliced it together to make a 3-minute and 18-second video, and then in a very surreal turn of events, the video went viral, and it, weirdly enough, made international headlines.
You spoke to this a little bit, Emily, and thank you. What's been the reaction to your story and what you've done?
Yeah, pretty big reaction. For a while there, I think my video kind of broke the internet, which I love that phrase so much. But abortion is an emotional topic, and we're not used to actually seeing the abortion filmed, like seeing it. It's such a mysterious topic, and I think that the anti-abortion movement has been very effective in using the mystery and the stigma to spread all of these lies and about the kind of women who get abortion and what happens through abortion. And we just don't see what an abortion looks like very often in our social media. Not only that, but we also don't see a woman saying, "Hey, this was a good experience." It could have been a scary experience, but it was a very good, empowering experience. So I got plenty of, everyone wants to, all of the news reporters and everyone wants to talk about the negative. Which I think is testimony to how ingrained it is in our culture. When you hear abortion, you always think of like blood dripping down a woman's legs, or like that scene from Dirty Dancing when the woman is carried, she has a botched abortion, she's carried in a man's arms, and he's got like a ripped T-shirt on, and he's whisking away this woman to the hospital. And so everyone wanted to hear the negative. And there were plenty of negatives, sure. I mean, it made international headlines. I got negative. That's not a big deal. It's what's to be expected. But I think the most surprising thing was all the positive. I received emails, Facebook messages, tweets from women and men around the world sharing their own abortion stories with me. And I think that's why this is such an important event. Because what we see with abortion stories is that once someone shares their abortion stories, it has a snowball effect, and which is why I think my video got so much attention as it did, because all of a sudden you had something to point to and say, this is what it looks like. How do you feel about that? People would come to me and be like, I had a conversation with my mom about your video last night just because it was all over the news. And we had a really powerful discussion, and I didn't know she had an abortion, and she shared it with me. So it's been pretty miraculous how big this snowball has gotten, and it's really inspiring and exciting to see how much bigger it's going to get.
That's so powerful. Can you tell us more about Not Alone and your work with that organization?
Yeah, so I teamed up with Beth Beth, Brett, and Sherry Murfish, who are all pro-choice activists out of Texas. And we created the web campaign called NotAlone.us. And basically, we encourage and support women and men to share their abortion stories through YouTube videos. We believe that just like this beautiful event, that we need to start sharing our stories, but also letting our identities stand proudly next to our stories, and letting the world know that we're not ashamed, not afraid, and not alone. So yeah, it's been really exciting, and the stories, I mean, every story and every video we get, just, it fuels you so much to keep moving, and you realize that you're making a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Emily, and for helping shatter the stigma.
Yes, definitely so powerful. Thank you, Emily. And I'd also like to thank Graciela, who is leaving us now because you're heading the end of your shift. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do in Colorado with Calor.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
And now we want to share a story from Carol, which should be on video here.
Hi, my name is Carol. I'm from New York City, and I'm the co-chair of the board. I decided to share my story about an abortion just to get involved. I made a decision when I was 14 to have an abortion because I had been sexually abused by a family member, and I was just too ashamed to tell other family members. And I was afraid of people in school finding out I was pregnant. I actually didn't know that what my family member had been doing to me was sex. I found out that it was sex in a physical ed class when they showed us a health film about sex and puberty, and I found out that what they were doing to me was not right. By the time I found out, I also realized that I remembered I had a period, and then I didn't have one, and the film said, if you have a period, that makes you a woman, and you're able to get pregnant at that point. And then I realized, because the film said when a woman gets pregnant, she stops having her period. So I said, maybe I'm pregnant. And I went to the hospital, a clinic, health center, something like that in South Carolina, and took a pregnancy test and found out I was pregnant, and went back and scheduled an abortion. And once again, the reason why is basically out of shame, fear of repercussions in the family. I didn't want to be seen as a person who let someone do that to them. I took all the blame because I'd been sexually abused from the time I was about 5 or 6. And in my family, you didn't tell. It was the dirty, dark secrets you didn't talk about. And so the process was very daunting. I remember it was scary. I kept hoping that it would happen. I just wanted it to be over. I was scared to do it, but I was even more fearful of what was growing inside of me. The most fearful part of it was when I went back to the health center a couple of days later to schedule the abortion, and they told me I had to tell an adult. And I just didn't feel like I had anybody I could turn to. I was being raised by my grandmother and my grandfather, and I was terrified of my grandfather because he was very abusive. So I decided to find my mom, who was an alcoholic, on the other side of town. And I went and I told her. I didn't tell her who did it. I just told her I didn't know. I just told her I was raped and I didn't know who did it. And someone pulled me into a yard and I didn't see their face. And she went with me and signed the papers, and I had the abortion. So I guess you would say that she supported me in this. Some people don't have support. At least for the instance, I felt supported. And then a deep depression set in, like just immediately after the ordeal was over. And I don't think that depression ever lifted. As time went on, later on in the years, I actually went to church trying to find redemption because of the guilt and feeling like I, committed murder. And I went to church, but I didn't feel like I could share it with anybody in the church because I was too ashamed and embarrassed about what was going on. I just hoped that I could keep it between me and God, and He would forgive me, but I just never felt forgiven. So I came to New York. I left South Carolina when I graduated high school. I came to New York, and I made a career for myself. I got a job. I was going to school, etc. But the feelings, the stigma, the embarrassment, the shame, the degradation, and the sense of loss never left me. And eventually, I became involved with drug use and abuse. And I used drugs for about 12 years until I got arrested for selling a couple of cracks to an undercover cop, and I went to treatment. And after treatment, I went to school, and I gained a couple of degrees. And today, I serve as a co-chair ward. I work for the city of New York. I work with people who are HIV positive, as a family case manager slash advocate. And I teach college. I teach at the college, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and at the College of Lewis Shell. And I teach classes referring to psychology and drugs and etc. I don't feel like the laws governing abortion affected me because at that time, this is like 1975, abortions were illegal in South Carolina. The laws have changed over the years, but I never had to have another abortion. Actually, I couldn't. I barely survived the first one, and so my self-esteem, my sense of self-worth, and my self-concept would not allow me to do it again, no matter what. So I have children, because I was using drugs, who I don't even know who their father is. But I had made a promise to God, if He let me get through that one, I would never allow myself to get to that situation again. And as an adult, I just didn't feel like I had the right to terminate another pregnancy, or I didn't think that my depression would allow me to do it and survive it. So, but I think it's very, very, very important that we have reforms placed where in every city, state, county, if a woman has to choose an abortion, she's able to. Like, my story is the story of, I'm sure, countless other young women who are too ashamed, and because they aren't able to tell someone, they will put their lives at risk.